Alright, we are back with a new video, and today we are once again updating the power rankings for the Amazing Race 34 following episode 7. And honestly, this week was a bit boring for these rankings, as I feel like not much change in terms of my views of these teams, but we'll get into that in a moment. But there are 7 teams to talk about, and let's not waste any more time, let's get right into the video. So starting off at number 7, we have the boots from this week, and here we have Glenda and Lumumba. And honestly, I felt like they were pretty much dead to rights from this point, where even with the time penalty and it not being that big of a deal, I still felt like they were far enough back to where they were unlikely to win the race. And of course, we did see that play out. And it's kind of a shame to see them go out here, as I feel like they're pretty fun characters. And plus, I felt like they got along pretty well, and it was pretty fun seeing them interact. But again, they were not the best team in the world, and it makes sense for them to go out here. So because of that, they're here at number 7. And with that, there are 6 teams, a lot to begin to talk about. And as usual, I'll be ranking them based on how likely they are to win the race, based on their current race ability. But at number 6, this should be pretty obvious, but the team that I have at the bottom here is Aubrey and David. And what does there really say about them? I feel like despite them coming into the leg in a good spot with second place, they more so returned to their typical performance where they really struggled getting to the roadblock with them getting lost. And while they did okay at the roadblock, they were essentially second to last from that point on. And yes, while they do a good job getting to the detour, once they are at the detour itself, they sort of slide behind to second to last. And really, they benefit a lot from Glenda and Lumumba being pretty far behind. And at this point, I feel like they are in the back of the pack. And while I do give them some credit for surviving as much as they have, I feel like they're definitely a team that's unlikely to win the race. So because of that, I do have them here at number 6. Now we're moving on to number 5, and we have another team that's hovering around the same spot. And here we have Quinton and Mattie. And I feel like this leg was also pretty quintessential for Quinton and Mattie, where despite them starting off okay in 3rd place, they obviously get really far behind at the end of the roadblock, where they end up all the way in 6th place by the start of the detour. And while they eventually come out of the leg okay, I feel like Quinton and Mattie again are demonstrating that they are too volatile of a team for me to feel that confident in them, where despite them being capable of making pretty big comebacks at points, they're also prone to pretty big collapses as well. So with that, I can't have them any higher than here. And realistically, I wouldn't be surprised if they end up having another collapse and end up getting eliminated over Aubrey and David, which would, funnily enough, allow Aubrey and David to continue in the race, but whatever. But again, I feel like I can't have them any higher than number 5 here. Now we're moving on to number 4, and we are again sticking with the usual order. And here we have Derek and Claire. And this was actually a good leg for them, where they obviously did pretty well on the detour that allowed them to jump all the way to 2nd place. And yes, while they do get outpaced by Emily and Molly by the end of it, they still come out of it in 3rd place, so 1 spot above where they were at the beginning of the leg. Again, I feel like they're a good team, and realistically, I think they have a shot to win compared to the teams we just talked about. But again, I feel like at this point, I'm not as confident in them as those other teams. So because of that, I do have them here at number 4. Now we're moving on to number 3, and honestly, I did consider putting this team a bit higher on the list, as realistically, I think they are a bit more likely to actually win the race than the next 2 teams we'll be talking about. But again, they had a pretty lackluster leg here, but here we have Luis and Michelle. And I feel like with each week, I am getting higher on Luis and Michelle. I feel like they are starting to look like a team that could genuinely win the race and have the combination of a solid edit and their race ability to where I could see them scrapping it out at the end. But the main reason I have them at number 3 this week is because of their performance here, where they did sort of crumble at the detour that caused them to fall like from 1st place all the way down to 4th place. So I feel like I couldn't really put them on number 1 this week. And especially considering that I didn't even have them at number 1 last week, I feel like that was enough to keep them a bit lower for this week. Though realistically, I could see them jumping if the next 2 teams we'll be talking about continue to struggle on the way. So because of that, I do have them here at number 3. Now we're moving on to number 2, and I'm still not feeling that comfortable about this team, but they did win the leg this week. But here we have Marcus and Michael, and yeah, they won the leg. Now, granted, it was a bit of a bumpy road where obviously they started in 5th place and they did pretty mediocrely on the roadblock. But then they are able to completely race the detour and obviously breeze through without too much trouble, win the leg there. So I feel like through that, they were able to like impress me to a degree. And I feel like that was enough to have them at least this high. I feel like they're a team with a long longevity and will probably be one of the big contenders coming down the stretch. But again, I still have this concern that maybe they'll struggle towards the end. And I feel like their performance on the roadblock was an indication of that, where they really struggled with the memorization aspect, which I feel like could come back to bite them later on. And realistically, I could see them sliding down the rankings because of that. But considering that they actually won the leg despite that, I don't feel like they should be too low because of that. And I did have them at least as high, but realistically, I could see them struggling down the road. So because of that, I do have them here at number 2. And now at number 1, the team that I believe is the most likely to win the race right now is Emily and Molly. Now, if I'm being honest, I still feel like Luis and Michelle have more room to move up and potentially surpass them. And I feel like Luis and Michelle seem like a team that could be built to actually win the race. Whereas I feel like someone like an Emily and a Molly, yes, while they're getting a lot of screen time between them being twins and a lot of the focus being on their leg injury that is somewhat slowing them down, a part of me still feels like they could just be like an end game boot, like a team that maybe doesn't win, but they've definitely overcome a lot of adversity along the way, which does concern me about their overall winning chances. But considering that Lewis and Michelle did not do well at the end of the leg here, I feel like that sort of leads Emily and Molly to still be this high, where despite their struggles, they did get a 2nd place finish here, which is something to say the least. And I still feel like they're going to be major characters moving forward, and a decent enough team at that. But if I'm being honest, I still feel like I'm not that confident in saying they're going to win the race. But considering the rest of the field, I mean, they kind of fit. And with that, I feel like they are the team that right now is the most likely to win. And because of that, they're here at number 1. And there we go. That will do it for this week's video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out with the channel. I know this was a shorter video this week, but honestly, I feel like this week didn't really change my view of a lot of these teams. And through that, I feel like I didn't have too much new to add about them, as I feel like future weeks could potentially reveal some new information. But until we do, I feel like my opinions on the race are pretty solid up to this point. But obviously, I'll be back again next week to update the power rankings again, so stay tuned for that. I'm also covering Survivor 43 right now and doing power rankings for that, so stay tuned for that as well. And if you haven't already, be sure to join my Discord server, which I'll leave a link to join in the description. There's a lot of stuff coming your way, but for now, that's the video. See ya.